You're listening to the Business Marketing Show, episode number 19. You can find us at businessmarketingshow.com or on iTunes.
Today we're talking to Adam Fitzgerald from the Frontier Group, software development company based in Perth. And Adam's company specializes in, well, he can probably explain it better, but it specializes, I think, in two things. One is custom app development and mobile app development. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Thanks very much, Brendan.
Hey, Adam. How are you?
Hey, Ed. I'm very well, thank you.
Good.
Did I get that intro right?
Yeah, that's pretty close.
So,
yep.
Tell us more. I mean, we have known each other all together for about 5 years now, but you guys have known each other for a lot longer. You actually grew up together in the town of Bunbury in Western Australia.
Australind, Ed.
Oh, sorry, Australind. Okay.
It's a different town.
It's a different town. Okay, so there you go. See, this is why I know nothing. But then we ended up getting back together to run the Achieve More Online workshops at the end of 2009, start of 2010, and here we all are together again. So Adam, you've been pretty busy. You've taken your company from just you and your business partner to quite a big deal now, and it's got lots of staff and all sorts of things happening. So give us a rundown on your main areas of focus of what you do, and the business name is the Frontier Group. So people can find you at thefrontiergroup.com.au, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, so we're a software development company specializing in web applications, mobile applications, and data analytics, which is probably our third stream of business at the moment. So, definitely sort of custom app development for businesses, small business, medium enterprise sized businesses, as well as startups. And then sort of the analytics side is a bit more of investigating sort of big data that, your big customers like, your national and international corporations, and sort of dealing with their data and presenting it to them. So, that's kind of the areas we specialize in.
Awesome.
So you're different to a regular web design company, right? Completely different.
Yeah, so they'll generally focus on sort of building websites and extending the functionality of websites. Just to have a little bit of application functionality, but generally as a supplement, and that's those are sort of really small, or generally small projects. You can sort of knock out a lot of those in a year, and sort of just keep that sort of same work going. Whereas we're a bit more, I guess, custom. Every customer has completely different needs. Everything we have to build from scratch, just to sort of meet their requirements, and we have a bit of a flow-on process as the project goes along. And just sort of evolve their ideas and what they're looking for to come up with the finished product.
Awesome. A lot has happened in the world of apps. I mean, there's always been applications, technically, that people have been using for many, many years on the internet. But people...
Applications as software, we should say that.
Applications as software, true. Thank you, Brendan. Applications as software, as opposed to what most people probably think of when they hear the word app as something that's on their iPhone or on their Android. So you do both. Now, since the iPhone sort of took off and became very popular, you've done quite a lot of interesting apps for that application. But what is it that you would say you do more of? Do you do more of application software that's used online, etc., or do you do more of apps for iPhones or Androids?
It's been cyclical, but at the moment we're definitely doing more of just the software development, so the web side of things. Sort of last year we would have been the other way around and would have said maybe 75% of our business was building mobile applications for both iPhone and Android. The interesting part of that, I suppose, is many sort of mobile applications will have some sort of software in the background or running on a server, which is that other work anyway. So a lot of apps just can't stand alone by themselves on a phone and run properly. They need to be pulling in data from somewhere and providing a web front end for an administrator or a business or something like that. So generally the two go hand in hand. So when you sort of have the back end for a mobile app plus other projects that you're working on, generally the web side of things is sort of taking a bit of a resurgence at the moment.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. So there's a big difference between, I guess, a mobile website and mobile apps. So do you guys do both, or tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so there definitely is a difference. A mobile website can be a couple of things, either a responsive version of your full desktop version of your website, which means as your screen size gets smaller, the website can kind of sort of rework its layout for best fit for that screen size. And that's a responsive website. And that means it can operate on a giant sort of LCD screen up on a wall somewhere, but also it can operate on a phone screen as well, which is much smaller. It sort of cuts out information that's not necessary for somebody who'll be looking at that website on the go if they're using their phone. And that's generally, any sort of web design company will be able to sort of integrate that and implement that for somebody. And that's a mobile website or a responsive website. Sometimes a mobile website can also just be built on its own. So rather than having several different sort of sizes of the website as your screen size changes, you just have a full desktop version and then a smaller version, which may have different information, different functionality. Either way, they're both websites. So if you're on a phone, you go to Safari on your iPhone or Chrome on an Android device and just look at that website by typing in the URL. You can also bookmark that to your home screen on the phone, and it appears like a mobile app, but it's still just a website that's sort of controlled. You have to have the internet on to access it, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And that's automatically, so as soon as the visitor goes to the site, the device they're on automatically detects that there's a mobile version of that site and then displays that rather than showing the desktop size version, correct?
That's correct, yeah. So there's a few little things you can put in behind the scenes and just sort of control what device you're viewing it on and how it looks and that sort of thing.
Yep.
And the mobile cool. app then is a specific piece of software that's built and then sort of released through the App Store or so forth, with a custom, it's obviously custom functionality that a business needs, to perform certain tasks that users will need to do.
Awesome.
Cool. So when you do apps, right? Because in my mind, there's two different types of people who do apps. There's someone who does, I guess, probably more. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. You guys do more apps for business, but then there's also apps like games and things to make money online. Would that be how you see the market split up, or the types of people who get apps built?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of sort of the startup area, people who've been doing something else for a while and then, I have an idea or sort of can see other people, making money from mobile apps and online software and sort of have an idea and manage to raise some money and then sort of want to put that into practice. So there's definitely a market for that as well. And that's generally sort of, you'd be building that for everybody to use. So if you're building a game or something, you just, want as many people as possible to be grabbing that. So it's not business focused. It's just any idea that somebody has that they think, people will want to use and will somehow help them out or something like that. And they're just looking for that to be converted into an app.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. So Adam, what's the difference between a designer, a developer, and a programmer? So, I mean, that gets used a lot. Those terminologies, don't they, Brendan? And
yeah, I mean, I guess people throw them around as generic terms for anyone who does website stuff. So we should probably clarify the difference, right?
Because they are very, very different areas. So you tell us your version of what they are: designer, developer, and programmer.
Absolutely. So a designer, we would consider a graphic designer or a web designer, two slightly different roles, but typically they're a lot more merged these days. Somebody who's basically creating a design, so the creative aspect of the visuals that somebody will see. So if it's a mobile app, creating those screens that people see, just designing flats. They don't function. They don't do anything. They're just images, but it sort of lays out the flow of an application. The same thing applies to websites and designing posters or marketing material. So that's I guess sort of the designer role. Then we have the developer and programmer, which can be interchangeable. The difference we sort of put from our perspective is a programmer is just somebody who writes software. So give them a task, tell them this is the task you need to write, and then they'll create that code for you. A developer we like to think uses their brain a little bit more in the process. So they'll think about the idea they've been presented, sort of use their knowledge and expertise to either sort of rework that idea or have a discussion about it, come up with how it needs to be solved, and then solve it as well. So we like to think that our company is made up of developers who kind of take on that extra role of relying on past knowledge to sort of solve problems and get a bit more into the crux of solving the problem first, rather than just, here's a task, I'll just go bang away at that.
Fantastic.
But essentially they're doing, the end goal is the same. They're just creating the software code that makes the application run.
Cool. You're next, Brendan.
I'm next. What else do I have on my notes here? Well, okay, so say, someone's thinking about getting an app built, they have an existing business. I'd say it's probably, I don't know, you tell me, like there's, I see quite a few years ago, I had a lot of people come to me with great ideas for apps. We don't do apps, but, kind of lay people, I guess you could call them, who have an idea for an app and want them built, or someone who has a business and wants to get an app built. What would be the things they need to think about before they pick up the phone and call someone like you or send an email, or, surely there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done first, right?
There is, and there definitely should be. I think you find you get a lot of those phone calls now because advertising of apps is a lot more popular. It's hit mainstream television. A lot of the news, you can turn on the 6 o'clock news and you'll see an ad about, or an article about somebody who's made $1 million off an app that they just thought up and created on a Sunday afternoon. That's not really what happens. And, if it does happen, then that person is very, very lucky. It's more a case of coming up with an idea and then getting a few things underway, like your business plan, your target audience, what the competition is like. Is this something that people would actually use other than your immediate family, who you may have just asked to find that answer out? A bit like going on Australian Idol. Yes, you can sing.
Yeah, so good example.
I'd recommend spending a lot of time sort of working out how this would function as a business, for starters. You can't just sort of knock up an app in a couple of hours and then become a millionaire when it's in the store. There's a lot of groundwork. There's some standard sort of things you can follow and help, but you do need to spend a lot of time thinking about it. And that's really all we sort of look for, is have you sort of planned out how a business might work? Do you have any business experience? Because obviously if an app does start to make you money and take off, then all of a sudden you'll be running your own business. And I think a lot of people might sort of not think about that side of it. So, you've got to be prepared to do the hard thinking and the legwork and the documentation and all sorts of things. And it's nice if you can have thought about that, before you sort of approach someone. Once you've approached someone, then you can really get into a discussion about the idea itself and how to go about turning that into a real application.
Very, very cool. Yeah, it is. I'm disillusioned now, Adam. That idea I had for the automatic app that sort of opened a cat flap door, that's just going to have to get flushed down the toilet now, because I don't think there's anyone that really wants it. So, and I thought it's only going to cost me $500 to make, and surely it's going to rake in millions of dollars. So you're telling me that's just not the case?
Not usually, no.
Not usually. Okay, all right.
I guess a lot of because apps can cost money to buy, and usually, the sort of figure of 99 cents has been widely publicised, that's what an app is worth. It can be misconstrued that that's what an app costs to develop or something like that. So an application can actually have a lot of costs involved, and they can, sort of the projects we work on, minimum cost for a typical mobile application that does something useful, sort of starts at $50,000 for us to do that development locally here in Perth. So, we get a few people that sort of are expecting, a few $100s and then get a bit of a surprise. So,
yeah. Everyone expects
perpetuated by the media.
Yeah, that's true, and that they expect they can get them done in India for the same quality and the same thing for $500 or $1,000. So you must come up across that quite a lot.
Yeah, so for that sort of thing, the rates are a lot cheaper, but you do need to have some sort of management team in place to make sure the project actually gets done correctly. We sort of come across a lot of customers who've tried 3 times to build something, doing it that route, so they've already spent a smaller amount of money, but 3 times over they sort of get to us, and then we can sort of go through the pitfalls that they've already learnt, and then show them other ways to do things. So it can be successful, but even if you do it successfully that way, it's not as cheap as people think.
No.
There's a lot of factors that go into building an app. Just because it fits on a small screen, there's still a lot of stuff behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's a bit like the same thing, I guess, applies, and we've talked about this already, Ed. Just the building a website, it's not just building the website, it's all the extra bits go around it, like the marketing, even like for an app, you're building a piece of software, so you're going to have customer support. Like Adam just said, there's back-end infrastructure that supports the app. It's not just the piece of software on the phone that might be tied to a server that has, supports that app. So I guess there's ongoing costs as well around that, about the support and servers and infrastructure as well, right, Adam?
Yeah, that can certainly vary, but there's things that are always in place, such as hosting, which is sort of what controls the server in the back end so that it is actually there and available for the app to use. That's obviously an ongoing cost. That can vary. We provide virtual machine hosting for some of our customers, and that can be up to sort of $300 a month. They could be using something like Amazon or cloud-based hosting, and that varies based on the usage. So if your app becomes popular, then it can become very expensive. And if you don't sort of have a money-making plan attached to your app early on, and it becomes popular, then your costs can become prohibitive very quickly. There's also sort of ongoing maintenance or future rounds of work. Once an app goes into the App Store, for example, if someone's already got an iPhone, they'll probably see there's updates coming through for apps that they've downloaded. So that's all work that a developer has to do, and that's all sort of time and materials or what have you. So, and then there's new features and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of extra costs. It's not just a case of putting it out there and then just sitting back and waiting for the cash to roll in.
Because I thought I was going to become a millionaire. I was going to make an app and just. I like the Kardashians. Yeah? 200 grand a day or something.
Now, because we have an expert on this subject on the podcast, I just want to clear something up. Are there really big computers floating around up there in the sky, Adam? Because I think a lot of people think they are. Are there really things up there in clouds floating around, or is that just a terminology that's used?
I feel like I want to say yes, but I'm going to have to say no.
Yes, you're going to have to say no. That was a trick question.
So the cloud's an interesting term. Yeah, what that refers to is just anything that's sort of outside of your field of vision, I guess. So there's no, if you're in your office and you've got cloud-based software, or you're hosting your website, in the cloud, that just means that it's on a physical machine, on a physical server somewhere, but somewhere else outside of your network. So that it's kind of always existed, but the term has just become such an easy sort of marketing buzzword to drop in. So what it means is, everything is, when they say everything's moving to the cloud, it means you're just pushing all of your services away from your local, your laptop or your desktop or your internal, server at work, and out to some other business's data center or something like that. And then it's their responsibility to maintain that and make sure that it's always available to you. So, it's something you can hopefully sort of forget about and just, it just magically exists. But it's the same infrastructure. It's the same computer infrastructure, just somewhere else, and somebody else's responsibility to manage it for you.
Very good description. Thank you very much for clearing that up for me. Now I picture a completely different thing. So, and I'm sure others do. It is interesting though, because anytime people ask me about the cloud, I say, well, it's actually always been around since we've been using the internet. But it's just, as you say, a marketing terminology or an easy thing to sort of use to describe it. So, very cool. Now, one of the questions we've got here is an iPad app different to an iPhone or an Android app? And do they have to be developed separately, or can they be done in conjunction with each other? Or because back in the day, mainly it was the iPhone that was the in terms of applications for smartphones, that was the one that everyone was developing. And then the iPad came out, and then the Android platforms came out. So there's three technically different things that maybe have to be made up. So is that correct? An iPad and an iPhone app is technically slightly different, and compared to an Android app as well.
Yeah, that's right. So an iPhone and an iPad, I'll start there. You can have the same app running on both devices. So if you've got an iPad, it will look and feel like the iPhone version, just a bit bigger. That's the same app. That can be the same app. You can build a different app for an iPad and an iPhone because they have different screen layouts, and you can take advantage of sort of a larger screen on your iPad. So you can build two completely different apps for the same thing if you want to. You can actually put special code into one app though and sort of take advantage of those features on an iPad or an iPhone. So it's probably easier to think that it is the same app. It just has a bit of a different look and feel if you need it on an iPhone versus an iPad. So that's kind of the same thing.
Great. Yep.
And Android is another phone by somebody else. So different software. You have to create a separate app on an Android platform. So if you're building what's called native software, which means you are specifically coding in the programming language for that device, you can build a native iPhone app and a native Android app. And that means it's generally a little bit easier to take advantage of sort of the things that phone gives you. So GPS, camera, all the features of the phone. Accessing that reliably is a bit nicer if you're sort of programming in a native way. What that can mean is, essentially you might have to build the same product twice. So once for an iOS or an iPhone and iPad, and once for Android as well. There are ways that you can sort of circumvent that by building what's called cross-platform, which means you can build one application and then there's some tools that enable you to deploy it out to both an iPhone and an Android.
Mm-hmm.
That can have its own pitfalls as well. So generally you'll still need to do a little bit of customization for each one. But also those tools are very new, and there's new tools popping up all the time. So if they don't get well established or well supported, you can end up putting an app out there and then finding it's full of software bugs and things like that, and potentially no real way to fix those issues. You're sort of at the behest of somebody else who's creating that software for you.
Yeah.
So, in our experience, we've done both over the last few years, and it's a case of choosing the right thing at the right time. So depending on the budget, the needs of the customer, and what they're happy with, we sort of would go through the downsides, the pros and cons of both. And usually it costs twice as much if you're building a native app on iPhone and Android, but you get two better products, in our opinion.
Yeah, okay.
So, yep.
Cool. And that is an issue that, has become more prevalent as time goes by. It wasn't such an issue back in the early days of web development, is cross-platform compatibility. So, and that's what we find is, you're developing a site for a client and it has to look good on all of these different devices. And that can be tricky. So how do you guys deal with that in terms of, do you have certain procedures you follow when a client comes to you to say, okay, where is this going to be seen, who's going to be using it, and what devices are going to be the main user interface? So is there a strategy you have with that?
Yeah, so we have sort of a general set of rules, I guess, that we adhere to for starters. So, for example, with iPhone, we support the two most recent versions of iOS. So, for example, there's a massive difference between iOS 6 and iOS 7. Now iOS 8 is just released. So we roll over and say now, we support iOS 7 and iOS 8. And if a customer needs support older than that, then that's extra work because you have to basically write in different code and different functions to make things appear the same way. So there's that. Android can have, anybody can create an Android device. So you can create your own screen size, your own specs of the phone, everything like that. And that can cause a lot of problems. You basically, there's an unlimited number of devices you're potentially developing for there. And on the web as well, you've got different brands, web browser and so forth. So we go with the recent standards, and then if a customer has specific requirements, we'll ask them, if you're in government or something like that, you might have a different forced requirement that you have to deal with, and we have to cater for that. So we just pick the standards that are most recent, and then on an individual case-by-case basis, work backwards. But it's all extra work, and that's the issue is, you can spend twice as much on a project just to support, an older version of something sometimes.
Yeah, cool.
That's interesting. That's a good strategy. I haven't thought about that because when we build websites, we have, like you said, Ed, the same issue. particularly around Internet Explorer and old versions of Internet Explorer. So that's a good strategy, just to say that we don't support these. Because typically on the websites we build, we have, if it's an old browser, it'll come up with a message saying you have an old browser, but I haven't thought about it from a company policy perspective and as part of the scoping setup. So that's a good idea.
Very good. Thanks for that.
No problems.
What's next, Brendan?
What else? Well, let's talk about so that we've talked a lot about mobile apps. What about custom software that's separate to a mobile app that might run in a web browser or something like that? So now, I guess today there are cloud apps that cost very little and they replace banks of servers. I know when I had my IT company, we had a whole server rack in the office and then we had half a server rack in the data center. So now, even in my business now, we have no servers and have replaced all our infrastructure as cloud. So there are, obviously the situations where a company does need custom software. At what point should someone think about, what's the tipping point, I guess, between looking at using cloud apps versus building something custom? Yeah,
so I guess the obvious consideration is budget that you have for a tool or a piece of software. So it's very easy to sort of pay the monthly, software as a service fee. It might be $49 or $99 a month or something to get a full-blown software system that you can actually use immediately, and that's great unless it doesn't sort of fit your needs and you have to change your business process to sort of work around it, and that's not acceptable. So that's one of the ways that people will sort of approach us for custom development. There's just nothing out there that does exactly what they want, or they have such a niche business or a niche component to their business that there is no generic package that solves those problems. Obviously, the existing software systems that are sold many times over, they're built in a generic way that solves the problem for 90% of users. But there's still that other 10% of businesses who have specific requirements that just can't be met in that way. So, people will approach us to either solve problems that other software can't solve, or replacing existing systems that were built 10 years ago, or just converting paper-based systems into an online software system that's just unique to people's businesses, because every business can be different, and as they sort of as businesses grow, they create their own procedures and policies and have an established business in place, and that can only be replicated by custom software development.
Yeah, it's a fair point, because I have for our business, I have Infusionsoft, which is, I think I actually have 2 copies of Infusionsoft for 2 different businesses I'm involved in, and it's nearly $1,000 a month. And now we've had it for just over 12 months, and it's only now that we're at the point where both businesses were kind of getting the processes up to scratch and into Infusionsoft. So it's not just about the software, the workflow and processes is a big part of it. And for us, we really underestimated the time and the amount of extra work. It's not just the raw dollar cost for that cloud stuff, but all the other extra manpower that goes into making the software work and that sort of stuff. So, interesting.
And cloud-based software can make it easy for you to trial as well, I guess. So that's good for some people, is they can just sort of sign up and have a go at something immediately to see if it suits their needs. Which means if people are coming to us looking for custom development, they may have already tried other systems, and we can sort of work with them to decide. You can integrate other things, or we can build extensions and additions to existing software systems as well. So it's not always a case of, there's nothing out there for you. You have to sort of shell out a whole pile of money and build something over a 6-month period. It might be, take this system. They have a developer integration that we can tack onto and just build, the extra bits and pieces that they need as well.
Cool. And it's probably important, just talking about budgets, like we've talked about some big numbers, like, it might be 50 grand or 100 grand to build custom software. But if you think about it, if that piece of software can replace 1 or 2 staff, then, looking at the cost, looking at the raw numbers of the cost is kind of, it's a bit deceiving when you do the real maths and you're like, well, we can build this software and we can eliminate 2 staff members or not necessarily eliminate them, but
that was harsh,
put them
Brendan.
somewhere else. You're fired.
All of Adam's staff are hearing that in the background going, what? Who's being eliminated?
put them somewhere
redistributed.
else.
Is that what
Redistributed? That's the word.
That's the way.
Yes.
Put somewhere else and redistribute it to another area of the business where they can kind of generate more benefit. Then those numbers make sense, because I know when we, because we're a small business, so $1,000 a month on software on paper looks like a lot of money, but then I look at that and I'm like, well, what's the alternative? We have a full-time sales guy doing that job, which, what's a person cost in Australia? Like, that sort of base salary could be between 60 and 100 grand a year. Plus then you've got to manage them and have a desk and computers and all the other bits and pieces to support that person. So, custom software, while it, on the price tag looks expensive, might not necessarily be that expensive if you do the real numbers on it.
Yeah, and software can be really good at highlighting inefficiencies in people's businesses as well. So, for example, people sort of processing manual time cards and things like that. That process has been around since forever, and many businesses still do that older style of sort of timekeeping. Converting that to a software system can, convert a team of staff who are purely just there to count numbers and type things into a computer. They can be used for something else, something much better for the business, rather than just that sort of data entry. There's obviously a lot of other things that need to be done. So we find that yes, it might be an initial outlay, but you've built a system for somebody that's freed up 5 staff members or something who no longer just have to sit there and do that sort of mundane task over and over again.
Cool.
You've worked on quite a lot of different apps over the years, in both application software and mobile apps. What's your standout one that you think was probably your best achievement in terms of what you produced and how it's going?
Everything.
That's the right answer. That was very politically correct, Adam, because that way you won't offend any of your other customers saying that theirs wasn't as good as the one you just talked about. So that was a good answer.
I'll give you a real answer as well.
Okay. Cool. There's got to be one you like more than any.
Absolutely, and that would be Pet Rescue, which is petrescue.com.au. That's
awesome.
Been around for 10 years. We did the most recent rebuild of that about 3 years ago now, and we've been working with them ever since, just to sort of continually make tweaks to that system. That's a site for pets to be adopted from, basically connecting people with sort of adoption groups. So they're a not-for-profit that's just helping connect all of those sort of 1 or 2 person operations, all around Australia, who have pets that need rehoming to people who want them, and they've rehomed. Now they're sort of rehoming about 5,500 pets a month. So that system is obviously pretty important that it's up and running and working well. So they're doing a great job, and they're starting to get some recognition for that. But that's probably one of our flagship products that we're involved in.
Yeah, awesome. I had a chat with the guys from Pet Rescue at a networking thing I was at a little while ago, and they were raving about you guys and saying how good it is working with you. So you've got a link to the Pet Rescue site on your website as well. So, but petrescue.com.au, go and check it out. Very good association. So that's cool. That is a good one. Well picked. I like that one too because there's doggies in it, and we're all doggy lovers. Funny enough, we're all Librans. Yeah. We're all Librans, and we all like dogs. What's that saying?
Nothing.
I know you're nothing at all. Can we analyze the data in that and see what we come up with? Now that's a good segue into data before we finish up. This is one of the new components of your business that you've only been doing for the last 12 months or so. Is that correct? So data analytics. Tell us more about that. Yeah. That's very cool, and there's some exciting stuff happening there.
Yeah, so a lot of our sort of larger enterprise customers, obviously, they're getting a lot of data into and out of various systems that they use. So, there's just a lot of stuff happening in those businesses that can be analysed, and typically, there's been teams of people who just have to work through those numbers and make spreadsheets and create graphs and all sorts of things, and that's a very long, labouring, intensive process.
Yeah.
But they need that information, and they need it closer to real time than they can currently do those sorts of things. So we sort of look at real time analytics and implementing systems that enable people to just be looking at those numbers and making actual decisions about the business rather than entering data into a spreadsheet, which is, everyone suddenly just becomes a data entry person, even though they're hired to do something, more than that. So we're sort of implementing systems that bolt on or integrate with existing systems out in sort of customer sites, and then they can be looking at that data coming through in real time. And we sort of use existing products. So one product we use is Tibco Spotfire, it's called. So it's a real-time analytics package. But then we'll take that and build custom integrations to that specifically for a customer's needs. So they'll say to us, we've already got this Spotfire product in place. We need something that shows us this, or this is our problem. Is there a way or some sort of graph or something you can create for us that solves that problem for us? And we'll go away and spend a couple of weeks and build something that just plugs straight into their existing systems. And then they can just sit in front of that and look at how the business is going. And that can be when you're sort of dealing with businesses that the top tier businesses in Australia, I guess, a lot of them are in the mining space and that sort of thing. So they've just got billions and billions of numbers, data and all sorts of things just flowing through every day through all their systems that they just need to know. And now they can sort of look at that in real time and make decisions. And that's, that's becoming a big area of software development as well. Just, little plugins and integrations into existing packages that just, tweak that last 1% that the business needs to, squeeze out the last sort of, profit for their shareholders and that sort of thing.
Yeah, because that's certainly something you really, unless... Yeah, I can't imagine sitting there doing that sort of stuff manually, but I mean, up until recent times, there have been people doing that and using Excel spreadsheets or some other type of software to do it. But so Spotfire, it's called. That's one of the tools you use. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's a tool that we can sort of install on a site, or some sites are already using tools like that, or other sort of competitors to that. And they're all customizable, and sort of can be worked with long term, to just get the most out of them. Like anything, it's an off-the-shelf product that doesn't do everything right out of the box. You've got to sort of make it work for you. But it's just another way that businesses are sort of keeping ahead of other their competitors, I suppose. It's just, and that's how software can really help out.
Cool. So, Mr. Brendan, what else do we have to ask Adam at this stage?
That's it, I think. I think we're at the end of our list of questions.
We are. We could start talking about Nissan GTRs, Adam, but that's another podcast, don't you think?
I think so, unless you've got one already.
Well, I'm working on that one. I keep seeing them though. My reticular activating system is like radar anytime I drive around Perth, and they just keep leaping out at me, and I'm going, "Oh, he's got my car. He's got my car." Or sometimes it's a she. That's a sexist statement, but typically it's males that drive those things. So other than that, that's fantastic, and we'll let you get back to work and go and look after more customers.
That's very considerate of you, Ed. Thank you very much.
Or we can just keep talking.
To get in touch.
We can keep talking if you like.
If someone wants to get in touch, Adam, what's the best way to catch you?
Yeah, we've got sort of a contact form on the website. If someone's got a project idea in mind, at thefrontiergroup.com.au. Our phone number's also there on the website. You can call up and speak to sales.
Awesome.
Fantastic. We will put all that stuff in the show notes for people to see as well. So thank you very much for your time, Adam. This is actually a milestone for businessmarketingshow.com because this is the first three-way we've ever done. You guys can take that any way you like. Now, why are you laughing, Brendan? He's got a filthy mind, Brendan. So, on that note, thanks everyone for listening. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Brendan, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Bye for now.
Thanks, guys.
You've been listening to the Business Marketing Show. You can find us at businessmarketingshow.com or on iTunes.